afternoon. So we've heard a lot of great reflections and ideas today, and what I'm going to be talking about is how we get them done. Sometimes we don't bring our most innovative thinking to how we organize ourselves. And that's a crucial piece of the whole equation, because bringing it to the ideas to reality is how we're going to change our community. So how do we sustain that change inside our communities? How do we start the ball rolling? Because not any one person can do this anymore, not any one politician even, no business, no nonprofit organization in a community. It's really about what I call shared leadership. And that means people coming together from private, nonprofit, and the public sector to solve problems. And I'm going to illustrate the points that I'm going to make with a city called Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is a city that I know and love very well. And actually part of the reason why Evan connected to me was because I co-wrote a report called Voices from Forgotten Cities, which was in part about cities like Lawrence and cities like Richmond, Indiana. They're older cities, they're smaller cities, and they have some issues that they have to deal with. They have to find a new purpose. So Lawrence is a classic industrial city. 12 million square feet of mill space, was at one point produced the world's woolen cloth. And you can see that it's 75,000 people right now, and a lot of multifamily housing, very dense, lots of factories. And so it's an interesting place where you have beautiful architecture, like that. And just a few doors down, you have that. And Lawrence hit rock bottom in the early 90s. And there was a wave of arson and crime and abandonment at that time. That was sort of the nadir of it all. And but interestingly enough, and at this point, this was in around 2000, it was one of the poorest cities in the United States. But that wasn't the only challenge that it had in terms of finding its future. Because this is the future of Lawrence. Lawrence is the most Latino city in New England. 75% of the population is Latino. 43% of the population is under the age of 25, which is very unusual for anywhere, probably in the United States right now. And the real challenge is that its city leadership look like this. Now, this isn't really a fair slide because that's Senator Kennedy sitting in the middle, and he's been a great champion for this city. However, this is what the people of Lawrence look like. So the challenge that we had was, how do you create a civic space, a new kind of civic space, when you have a very dysfunctional civic environment right now, when you have populations that weren't talking to each other and maybe didn't even have the capacity to talk to each other. And it wasn't just Latino white, it was mill owner versus mill owner. They couldn't even get along with themselves, the mill owners next door to each other. So, see, I'm in the digital world too, and I'm going to show you my animation. Very crudely done. I'm going to explain what the city's version of its revitalization plan was. Essentially, it's, if you follow the red line, getting off the interstate on a new ramp, landing at the end of the arrow behind those buildings, which was formerly the site of a very contaminated mill complex, which would be demolished and turned into a surface parking lot. And that surface parking lot would serve the other mill buildings around it, so that people could more easily come in off the highway, park, theoretically work in one of these mill buildings, and then at the end of the day, leave the city without having to engage in any of Lawrence's messiness or deal with its people. And that was called the Gateway Project. And they worked on it for 30 years. At the same time, oh, there's my animation. And there's the magical parking lot. In the neighborhood, at the same time, there were a couple of small nonprofit organizations that had recently been established. And they were doing something that nobody had really done before, which was knock on the doors of the neighbors and ask them what they thought, what the challenges were, and what we should do about it. And that neighborhood organizing process was called Reviviendo. And Reviviendo in Spanish means coming back to life. So, interestingly enough, back to the Gateway Project, folks, which was the 800-pound gorilla in the room and frankly, sucking up a lot of the infrastructure money for the city and the bandwidth. They finally demolished the dirty mill complex. And they needed some federal assistance to be able to clean up the site and cap it so they could build the parking lot and finish their what they needed to do. So they went to Senator Kennedy and they said, well, Senator, this would be great for the city. We really need to do this. And to his everlasting credit, he said, where is the community in all this? And they didn't have a good answer for him. So they had to come back to the community and they started looking for us. And this presented an opportunity for us, but also a challenge, because this isn't the kind of project that really we thought was the way to revitalize the city. There was no benefit for the people who lived in these neighborhoods. So we had a strategic decision to make. Do we say no and say this is what our agenda needs to be, or do we say yes, we help you get your money, we help you finish your project so that there's not an 8-acre contaminated brownfield site adjacent to the neighborhood with a chain link fence around it that never gets done? And we chose the latter. We said, we'll help you get the federal funding, but with one caveat. You support us in a broad community vision and you participate in it. And they said, of course, no problem. So we had a bit of a marriage of convenience, and it became the Reviviendo Gateway Initiative, or RGI as we called it. And the first thing that we did was pulled together 9 focus groups, because we didn't want to throw all different kinds of people into the shark pool right away. There's a lot of prejudices that needed to be unpacked a little bit, and people needed to feel safe talking amongst their peers. So we had focus groups that were business people, mill owners, artists, youth, Spanish-speaking households, homeowners, English-speaking households. But we said the same thing to them. We presented a PowerPoint presentation that had statistics about the city and its challenges, and also talked about the city's infrastructure plans. And we ended each presentation by saying, what do you think we should do? How do you think we should leverage these investments and these opportunities for the betterment of the community? And the interesting thing was, because we videotaped every one of these focus groups, whether you were a Spanish-speaking renter in the neighborhood or you were an out-of-town white mill owner, they said the same thing. They wanted safe streets, they wanted more activity in the streets, they wanted housing and jobs and good parks, they wanted things in the mills. We brought everybody together afterwards and we played pieces of those conversations to each other so that they could see the shared values that they had. And that changed the dynamic in this room of people forever. because they realized that, the Latino folks in the neighborhood realized that these people who were out-of-town white mill owners weren't just extracting the wealth out of the neighborhood. In many cases, they were family businesses that go back years, and they did really care about the city. And for their part, those out-of-town white mill owners that have had families been around for a long time, they realized that it wasn't immigration that was tearing the city down. These people cared about their city. They weren't trashing it. They were just as frustrated with the problems and the trash on the streets as anyone else. So we started to meet on a monthly basis. And we basically, at that point, we said, who wants to participate in a steering committee to advance a vision? And virtually everybody said yes. So we immediately had a steering committee of about 50 people. We didn't try to formalize it at all. We didn't try to create any officers. Your participation got you in the steering committee. You showed up, you were part of it. So there's a small state park, a history museum. We met there. And we started doing things together. So on a monthly basis, 5:30 to 7:30 at night. So people who worked in town could stay late that one night, and the people who lived in town but worked elsewhere could come back and still have time to participate. And we always had dinner, and it was on a rotating basis. Someone, a business person or another person would host. Sometimes we'd do potluck. So we were sharing food together, and we were sharing experiences. The mill owners would take us on trips to their properties, site visits to their properties in the neighborhood. And they would show us nooks and crannies that you would never know about, even though the building was sitting right there like a monolith at the edge of the street. We'd go up to the roofs and see the city from a new perspective. I got to race around one of these old textile mills on a Segway, which was very exciting. But the point is, we had shared experiences, and from those shared experiences, we were able to build trust and relationships and a common sense of the world and what was happening to Lawrence, the challenges that we had, so that people could start to become advocates for each other. And very important in all this is the need to build the team. Places like Lawrence are so difficult to work in. They chew people up and spit them out. You can feel very isolated. So you need to have a team so that if you go deal with the craziness, you have somewhere to come back to. People, you can laugh about it and joke about it. One of my mentors, Bill Traynor, who's the guy with the goatee over there, he grew up in Lawrence. His dad was a police chief years ago. And he says something that was so true. He said, nobody is strong enough to get anything done in Lawrence. Everybody is just strong enough to tear everyone else down. And I think that's a common problem in many places. There's a lot of stories that we could be telling about the craziness, and this is one of them. This is emblematic for me. This is an old Catholic school that was abandoned for a long time. The city bought it years ago for $1. We found $4.2 million in federal funds to turn it into a public magnet school for the performing arts. The city council just had to approve the bond by a supermajority, 6 out of 9 votes. 5 out of 9 votes approved it. They forfeited this. To this day, this building sits there abandoned and is going to have to be demolished someday. So you need a team to be able to go back to, because how are you going to deal with things like that sanely? You can only do it if you have 10 other projects, good projects that are moving forward that you can go to, that you can work on. So, and it's important not to fight those fights backwards. You got to say, what can we do together today? And part of doing that is painting a picture of the future. And literally, could be pictures, but simple visuals to show people what the change could be like. It could be words. This is a vision statement that the steering committee crafted. Envisioning the Gateway District as the historic heart of an international city, a place that is vibrant, dynamic, diverse, and proud. That's something that everybody can understand. That is That is the why of Lawrence, of a new Lawrence. And people get that. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but you can get some of these renderings. You can find photos of places that are similar that you might like. Show people what the change looks like. But the whole point is that you have to raise people's expectations. If they start seeing world-class projects in the context of what they can do in their neighborhoods, they will raise their expectations. They will realize that they don't have to settle for that low bar anymore. And it's not that they don't want it, it's just that they can't imagine what they've never seen. And I'm going to save you $80,000 right here. Don't plan. Just set some goals and work towards doing them. And a corollary to that is do things that benefit everybody. So we had put together the steering committee with business folks and resident leaders and the city officials, everybody that we could in this area, institutions, the community college, the hospital. It couldn't just be about renovating the mill spaces. What was in it for the neighbors as well? So one of the things that we did, in addition to changing the zoning so that we could renovate the mills, was to look at the alleyways. These alleyways crisscrossed through the blocks in the neighborhood, and they looked like this. They were corridors of illegal dumping, of drugs, of crime, or they looked like that, just totally overgrown, piles of trash in them. We started helping the neighbors do cleanups. And this wasn't all organized by us. We made like rakes and the tools and the bags and kind of coordinated with DPW to pick up the trash afterwards. But let me tell you, these core of neighbors, they organized this. And when they started doing it, they had 50 people came out their doors. They didn't even know who these people were, but they saw the cleanup start going on and the neighbors came out and started helping. We started doing these little planning sessions just in the alleyways themselves with the neighbors. We'd pull out like a little hibachi grill, have some hot dogs and hamburgers, and talk about what the problem with the alleyways were and what we could do about it. I love the little drafting table there is the abandoned refrigerator. And get the kids involved. Lawrence is a young town, and that's where the energy is. So this became an intergenerational project. Oftentimes, anytime somebody would be out there cleaning, it'd be the kids running out there first, and they would bring their parents. And then we started having strategic partnerships. We brought in City Year, Timberland, New Balance, and we started having these cleanups with 250, 300 people. And exploiting the cute kids again. And this is one of those days, like was said before, where the magic happened. This was one of the best days of my life. We took these, 4 of these alleyways and we rebuilt them in one day. And it also serves the purpose of getting visible wins, early wins. And then we got better at doing it, and we started creating community gardens in the alleyways. We also thought it was important to be accountable. So from the beginning, we documented the vacant and abandoned property in the neighborhood, and the mill district, and the downtown, because that's all part of the district. You have this is the mill area, you have the downtown there, and the neighborhood right up there. And we started saying, well, where are the projects? So, red's the hot spots, the priority areas. The blue are the planning projects. Green is the other projects in construction, and the yellow is the completed projects. And every few months we'd update it, and over the course of years you'd see how the progress was made. And history can be a powerful ally. It's not just about a new story, it's about retaking the story of the past, because that helps create common ground as well. This was this was the largest woolen factory in the world at the time, the largest building in the world at the time that it was built. It's a third of a mile long, 1.6 million square feet inside it. Half of it's been demolished. It's an 800,000 square foot building. Used to look like this inside. And so by doing this, recuperating the history of the place, we're able to show the young people who are newcomers what goes on in these buildings. And you think they wouldn't care? They loved this stuff. This was history inside the buildings that next door. Those were buildings, those were always just those old factory buildings down there. But let me tell you, now that they understand what happened in there, they understand the Bread and Roses strike, hundreds and hundreds of mostly women and children striking for better wages. And it was also very important too with the old timers who were saying, you know, there's a parking crisis here in town. We don't need more development in town. We have too much of it already. Because you know what? You can go back, and we showed them this is what it looked like in the good old days. We had twice as much stuff there. We had twice as many people living there. And you know what? The good old days weren't always so good either, because the neighborhood wasn't as clean as you think it was. I have this great historic picture of an alleyway with, I tell you, as much trash back then in the 1920s as nowadays. So, you know, we were able to start looking at some of these places in the district that needed some help, that were the hole in the middle of the donut, and doing some planning. And here's one of my favorite examples of how you can get everybody involved. So we had a young architects program who worked pro bono with an architect who worked pro bono to help them create a scale model of this district. I'm just thinking about the digital models now and how much easier it would be to do this now in the future. But it's beautiful detail on this. And they built out the whole district with every single building, multiple copies of it, so that everybody could participate. And we firmly believe it's not just for planners or people who are educated. Everybody can participate who cares about the community. And so, you know, the mill owner set up this room. He actually took this big open space, created like a wall we could pin stuff up on. We put out, you know, maps and historic stuff. We workshopped the area so that everybody was talking about, the mill owners were in the room and people were talking about what we could do with their buildings. And everybody respected each other because there were good ideas. But you know, this model was amazing, and we could, people could move it all around, you know, fill in the gaps between the buildings, put parks, put parking. And you know, this is one of the things we really want, you need to do, is you got to blow people's minds, and that just means changing their expectations of what they think. When they see a mill owner come into the planning board, they expect them to be talking about their mills. They don't expect them to be saying, here's why we have to have some affordable housing too. Or when the residents come in before the planning board saying, you know what, we need shops in these mills. We need these mill owners to be successful. I just like the expression on his face, like he can't believe this model exists. And then outlast everyone. It's all about persistence. You gotta just win it. In a place like Lawrence, if you are there and you show up time after time after time, you'll get it eventually. So, and that's the same thing with zoning. Zoning in Lawrence hadn't been changed in 60 years. It was a relic of that dirty industry from 60 years ago, which is not coming back. And it basically, zoning prohibited anything you'd want to put in these buildings. So there was no, you could not put restaurants, housing, biotech, printing, publishing, none of that stuff. We changed the zoning after 8 months. We first went in there, universal skepticism. At the end of the 8 months, we had unanimous approval. And then once you learn how to do this stuff, replicate the success, then we took to another part of the city and we said, you know what, we're going to change the zoning for this mill complex too. And we did that. And you know, the 75 units have already been built in this, and another 225 are coming. And then finally, this is all about having fun and celebrating and building relationships. This is hard work, right? There's going to be plenty of hard work, but you want to go to the meeting because you have friends there. There's food there. You're going to find out some good information that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. So we were able to get, you know, a grant explicitly to try to bring the white arts institutions more in touch with the Latino population, where there was a lot of great cultural, sort of informal cultural stuff going on. The kids are just amazingly talented musicians and performers. So we bought these umbrellas and seats and sort of did this, you know, impromptu events in different places. So we'd have the Essex Art Center, which is sort of a long-standing kind of a blue blood sort of institution. And we'd also have the kids doing different kinds of performances. So you'd have Irish step dancers, you have like Mexican folk dancing, you have hip hop, you have the art being sold. We did things inside. We had the sort of a Dominican domino tournament. We brought the young musicians inside the mill spaces. We created a canal festival of lanterns. And the final thought that I just want to leave you all with is that, and this was a number of years ago, I could do another one about what's happening now. But maybe the biggest failure that we had was not systematically supporting residents to go be appointed to boards, to run for office, and take that next step to institutionalize it. However, you never know what the ultimate outcome is going to be of this kind of work. Just last week, there was an open mic poetry session for young people. More than 200 showed up. And this isn't an isolated incident. I got an email this week from one of the Lawrence English high school teachers. At least twice a month, there are these open mic poetry sessions held, always between 150 and 200 people. Hundreds of students go to summer programs around writing and performing. They go to writing conferences. And it's this renaissance of writing and performing driven by the youth in the city that is unbelievable. And he says there's nothing like it even in New York or Boston or Chicago. Certainly not in a city of this small scale. So they've taken that story and they've internalized it and they've changed it. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.